All right, hello and welcome to today's event, and thank you for joining us in this webinar where we're going to talk about prior authorization findings and blepharoplasty reviews. We're actually also going to talk about targeted probe and educate findings as well. So this includes blepharoplasty, blepharoptosis repair, and blepharoptosis repairs. Any of those that are submitted for prior authorization in the hospital outpatient department services. My name is Mary Sue Gardner, and I'm a registered nurse on the Provider Outreach and Education Department here at WPS. I'm joined today by other members of Provider Outreach and Education who are going to be assisting with the chat portion and the question and answer portion of today's event. Blepharoplasty, blepharoptosis, and lid reconstruction may be defined as any eyelid surgery that improves abnormal function or reconstructs deformities or enhances appearance. They may be either for functional or reconstructive or cosmetic purposes. As part of the prior authorization process for certain hospital outpatient department services, these surgeries were added to ensure that we are only granting provisional affirmation of services to be performed and billed to Medicare when medical necessity requirements are met. So today we're going to discuss the medical necessity requirements as well as those things that are potentially causing non-affirmed decisions on the first request for prior authorization, or if they make it through and they happen to be reviewed, such as a targeted probe and educate, what's causing those denials. On the screen is our disclaimer, and basically our disclaimer says we prepared this education as a tool to assist you as our provider. They were prepared with the laws, rules, and regulations as they stand today. But knowing that Medicare laws, rules, and regulations often change, it's your responsibility as a provider to make sure you're following the most current laws, rules, and regulations on the day you provide services. We're going to respond to any questions based on the facts given in the question and the current Medicare laws, rules, and regulations as they stand today. Also, CMS prohibits you from recording or taking screenshots of our presentation for profit-making purposes. Like I said before, we're recording this for you. We're going to place it on our YouTube channel, so there's no reason to do that. And since we don't know what you would be doing that for, we ask that you just please don't audio or screenshot record anything. All right, on the slide deck and on the page here is a list of acronyms that I may or may not use during the course of this webinar. So if I say an acronym that you're not used to, because Medicare is just full of acronyms, it's like acronym soup. If I happen to say something you don't know what it is, just refer back to this screen. And if it's not listed here and I use an acronym, just go ahead and place it in the chat and Jennifer can send out to you what it means via chat. All right, so why are we here? If you are responsible for prior authorization requests for any of these procedures, when performed in the hospital outpatient department of a hospital, my objective for you is to help you receive affirmative decisions for those initial prior authorization requests. So we're going to achieve this objective today by going through the coverage criteria. We're going to be discussing documentation requirements and tips. And we're going to explain how to properly complete those requests for prior authorization reviews. Even though non-affirmed decisions are on the hospital outpatient department side, this webinar should also be helpful to providers that perform these procedures. All right, so let's move in and talk about the coverage criteria. As defined in our LCD, and here's the LCD number, LCD 34528, which is the blepharoplasty, blepharoptosis, and brow lift. So as defined in that LCD, those procedures and lid reconstruction, again, are defined as any eyelid surgery that helps improve abnormal function, or it can be done for reconstructing deformities or enhancing appearance. So again, they can be functional and reconstructive or cosmetic. And we, as your MAC, are concerned with not paying for things that are considered cosmetic. So a little bit of information, the upper blepharoplasty, so that removal of that upper eyelid skin and the repair of a blepharoptosis should be considered functional or reconstructive in nature when that upper eyelid position or that overhanging skin of the brow is so low that it produces functional complaints, usually related to your visual field impairment, whether it's in the primary gaze or a down gaze reading position. So upper blepharoplasty may be indicated for chronic dermatitis as well due to that redundant skin. Another indication for blepharoptosis surgery is a patient with an anaphthalic socket. So that socket, they may be experiencing some ptosis or some prosthesis difficulty. The brow ptosis can also produce or contribute to functional impairment. So the covered conditions for these procedures are outlined in our LCD and listed here. We also are going to go out and take a brief look at these because there are two sets of coverage criteria. There's like a section A, which is the patient's signs and symptoms, and a section B, which is the visual fields that must be documented to support medical necessity. But before we link out to that, remember, for services to meet medical necessity upon review, we're going to look at your records for all the documentation that we discussed today, and we're going to look at that to make sure it's present in your chart and available, for us to do medical review or any medical review entity for Medicare if it should be requested. Also, remember, for these services to be considered for coverage under Medicare, they must meet all medical necessity requirements and not be deemed cosmetic in nature. So there are 11 CPT codes that fall under the hospital outpatient department prior authorization services, and we're going to be reviewing those as well. So I provided a link here, and I'm going to take you straight out to the LCD using the link. However, if you don't have the LCD, I want to show you how you can find it just straight out of the Medicare coverage database. So again, I linked you directly to the LCD, but if I just were to go to cms.gov and go to CMS's homepage, if I type MCD into the search bar, and my computer's being a little slow. Okay, give me a second. And you can see it comes up with, the first couple are going to take me to the MCD database. I'm just going to hit the first one. And I am going to type in blepharoplasty. And you can see WPS comes up as an option, but I'm just going to choose a WPS state. I'm going to choose Iowa, so I know that I am using the correct local coverage determination. And I can verify that by clicking on the provider contractor information and making sure this is a WPS LCD, because you don't want to be following the LCD of a different contractor if that's not who your Medicare administrative contractor is. So in the slide deck, I had said, you know, there's coverage criteria that must be met, and we kind of briefly explained that. And I said there's a section A and a section B. So as you read through the very first part of the coverage guidance of our LCD, it says down here that criteria in section A, which is the patient signs and symptoms, and section B, which is your visual fields, must be documented to demonstrate medical necessity. So when we do a review of your claim, this is what we're looking for. We're going to go out, we're going to make sure you have signs and symptoms. We're going to make sure if there's patient complaints, here's some information about those things. And we're going to also make sure that you have visual fields that support the required components that must be met to prove that this surgery is medically reasonable and necessary, because there is a difference of 12 degrees or more, or 30% visual field difference demonstrated between the elevated and non-elevated, or the taped and untaped, however you want to say it, in those visual fields. So again, that information is in the local coverage determination, but we're going to talk about these things as we move on in the slide deck as well. All right. So I like to, whenever I can, show you as many things and how to find them on your own, because most of you probably aren't going to keep our slide decks forever and ever. As I stated before, when we looked at the LCD, there's actually, or before we looked at the LCD, I'm sorry, there's actually 11 different CPT codes for the blepharoplasty, blepharoptosis, brow lift that fall into the prior authorization process when they're performed in the hospital outpatient department of a PPS hospital. So 13X type of bill, not specific to critical access hospitals, not specific to outpatient surgical centers that are not affiliated with a hospital, et cetera. So only a 13X type of bill. So the link in this, on this page, or on this slide of the slide deck, actually goes out to the WPS website. And it's going to take you to a list of all the hospital prior authorization information for HOPD prior authorization process. But to get here on your own, I'm just going to go back to our home page, which is WPSGHA.com. You can use the med.wpsgha.com, or even if you just put in WPSGHA.com, it will take you here. I am going to choose one of our J5, or one of our Part A, jurisdictions, because the HOPD reviews are specific to Part A. So I'm going to choose that. I'm going to go into the topic center, and I'm going to choose medical review. And then I'm going to scroll down to prior authorization. And you can see there's an overview here of the prior authorization process. So the blepharoplasty, blepharoptosis, repair, brow lift, these are the CPT codes that are included. So if you are a facility and you plan to perform any of these codes in your hospital outpatient department, you are required to request prior authorization of those prior to performing the surgery. So that's where you can, quick and easy get a list of those codes. And I'm just going to scroll down kind of fast, so avert your eyes if you have seizure disorders. The other place you can look is in the operational guides. So you can go to the CMS site or use our link here. This will take you to the operational guide. And it also lists all the services and the CPT codes that are under the prior authorization process. Scroll back up here, and we're going to go back to the slide deck. So make sure, again, if you are the hospital, you are the facility that's performing one of those 11 CPT codes, that you seek out provisional affirmation from us before performing that procedure. All right, as we move on, let's talk about documentation. So on your screen, as well as in our local coverage determination and on that medical review page, we have a list of documentation requirements that you need to send us for review. If you're seeking a provisional affirmation, or if your claim, has made it to the has made it to a medical review, so it's processed and it's held up pending medical review, the documentation that we need you to submit is basically listed on that on the screen. So patient complaints, what's the difficulty that they're having? Is there difficulty reading? Is there difficulty looking through their eyelashes? Are they having difficulty with gait and balance because the peripheral vision is obstructed? So those are the types of things that we want to know. There needs to be a preoperative examination by that eye physician that is planning to do the surgery, as well as history and physical of the patient. So the visual fields with the physician interpretation, visual fields must be submitted. We need to have the elevated and non-elevated, or taped and untaped, however you want to say that. And the physician interpretation of those must be written somewhere in your documentation. So if you send us the visual field and there's no physician, like a written physician interpretation of what that physician sees from those tests, then we're not going to accept your request as having all documentation. And for the most part, if you get all the way through and you try to process and we, for some reason, catch it for medical review, like on a targeted probe and educate review, and there's no interpretation by the physician, then the services will be denied. So again, visual fields with the physician's written interpretation. We need to know what that doctor sees from that test. And we need to see that that supports the 12 degrees or 30% requirements for you to support that it's medically reasonable and necessary and not just cosmetic in nature. All right. Other items of documentation that we need to see, photographs. So it is a Medicare requirement that the patient or the patient's photographs are submitted for medical review. Do the best you can with the photographs. We understand that sometimes when they're scanned in that they aren't as visible. But again, if you need to lighten them a little on your site or whatever it is before you load them to the portal or send the documentation in hard copy for review, do what you can to give us, the most decent photograph that you can. Your documentation also needs to support which eye. Sometimes we don't get that. So again, make sure which eye the surgery is being completed on is in the documentation. And then any documentation that helps to indicate medical necessity of your planned procedure, whatever that may be. If you document on something and you say, hey, this really, drives home what's going on, whether it's referrals from other physicians because of patients' recent falls, because of visual obstructions, any of that information just only behooves you to send it in. It only supports what you're doing is actually medically reasonable and necessary. All right. So before moving on to discuss the common findings, I want to, first discuss some of these key documentation points. And remember that when we linked out to the LCD, it states, coverage criteria for Section A, which is your signs and symptoms, and Section B, which is your visual fields. So that's why this list includes all that. And again, patient complaints, visual fields, those are the two big things that you need to support, and any and all information you can give us to support those sections will only benefit you. All right, so as promised, let's move on and talk about these patient complaints just a little bit more. And this information is actually in our LCD as well. So the documentation in the medical records, again, has to or must, whatever words you want to use, include patient complaints and findings secondary to that eyelid or brow malposition. And those could be like interference with vision or visual fields, like related to activities. Again, difficulty reading due to the upper eyelid drooping, looking through the eyelashes, seeing the upper eyelid skin, or even brow fatigue, history of falls, history of accidents because of driving the car and maybe having less peripheral visual fields. Other things like chronic eyelid dermatitis due to that redundant skin, difficulty in wearing the prosthesis or artificial eye, as some may say. And then again, we go into margin reflex distance of 2.5 millimeters or less, palpebral, fissure height on your downward gaze, and then the presence of Herring's effect on, with numbers 4 and number 5. And you can find more information in our LCD about the Herring law. And I'm not going to go into that totally in our review today, but that LCD does have some more information in Section B about that you can find. Okay, and then visual fields. In the documentation of the visual fields, the medical review staff is really looking for that documentation for the indication of surgery, and that it's medically necessary and that it's not cosmetic, and that it's supported by a difference of 12 degrees or more or 30% superior visual field difference. And that's got to be demonstrated, with those fields elevated and not elevated, taped, untaped, however we're going to say it. So we're going to you can use those also to support the blepharoptosis if needed. We accept the quality standards for visual fields. It's usually the Goldman perimeter technique. But we will accept standard automated, the standard automated perimeter technique. Sorry, lost my spot for a second. Visual fields are not necessary for patients with an anaphthalic socket. who are experiencing some ptosis or difficulty with their prosthesis. So know that that, is not needed. However, you need to let us know if they're having problems with that socket that warrant the blepharoplasty, blepharoptosis, or lid repair. All right. Submitting documentation requests. On the slide is a picture of the prior authorization request form. And I've provided a link to this form on the slide as well. So if you have the slide deck, you can always link right to it. But I'm going to link there now, and I also want to show you how to find it, in case you don't have you don't have this PowerPoint in front of you. So again, that link took me right to this form. But if I were to back up, and I'm just going to go to our home page again by just clicking on that icon, we have some quick links over here on the side of our page. If I'm still in Part A, I'm in J5, I could be in J5 or J8, it doesn't really matter as long as I'm in Part A. I'm going to go to Forms, and I'm going to scroll down here to Prior Authorization, and you can see the hospital outpatient department prior authorization request form is there, and I'm going to download that, and I can save this to my desktop or save it somewhere, but it's going to bring up the prior authorization hard copy request form. Now, this is pretty much the exact same questions in the exact same order if you were to do the request on the portal. But remember, if you are a physician office submitting on behalf of a facility, you cannot submit for them via the portal. Your request for prior authorization for the facility to perform and bill the procedure would have to be done via hard copy and sent in with this request form attached. And you can fax it, you can send it via mail, etc. But when you get to the request form, you have to select your jurisdiction. So are you J5 or J8? You have to select what surgery. You have to fill in the information. Is this an initial request or resubmission? If it is a resubmission, so you've requested before, but maybe you did not receive an affirmed decision to go ahead and perform the surgery because you didn't submit everything, you would hit resubmission and you would give us the UTN number on the previously submitted. There is an opportunity for an expedited request, but expedited requests should only be used when the normal time frame for the review is going to seriously jeopardize the life or health of the beneficiary. So I can't think of any times when delaying a blepharoptosis, blepharoplasty, et cetera, for a week is going to jeopardize the life or health of your beneficiary. So it's not for scheduling difficulties. It's not because the surgeon's going to be available or the physician or the patient is a snowbird and is going to go from Michigan to Florida, before the end of the year, so we need to get this done right away. That's not what this expedited request is for. That's only when delaying the review could jeopardize the life and health of the beneficiary. And we have 10 business days in which to review. Now that time frame may be shortened in the future. They are shortening it for the prior authorization on the ambulance service. So I imagine that this one will be shortened as well to probably the same thing, which will probably be 7 calendar days. But right now, there's no word on that yet. So again, filling out this information, all of the information regarding the facility, all of the information regarding the physician, the beneficiary information, and then down here is where you tell us what CPT code is going to be billed any modifiers, OD, OS, if those are necessary, you know, to tell us which side, and the units of service to be billed. Now, if the physician is in between doing two different codes, then you should request a provisional affirmation for both, and that should be explained in your documentation that we're unsure until procedure starts which procedure is actually going to be performed. This is less likely in a blepharoplasty, blepharoptosis repair, but it does happen sometimes that the decision changes. So, you know, if there is possibly another code, then I would make sure you put both of those codes on the request. And then any additional information, if it's necessary to provide, you would put in here. Again, if you want to, if you're using the OD or OS modifier and you just want to say left or right down here, that, you know, that is always very helpful, just to make sure it's all spelled out. And then again, your information, title, email address, and phone number, in case we need to get back a hold of you about what needs to be, like any information that we didn't get, maybe we can request that you send that instead of us just non-affirming it. A way to get a hold of you, you know, it is a necessary piece of that information. All right, let me go back out to the slide deck here. And remember, show you, let me link back out to this. I can't show you what it looks like in the provider portal, but the portal user manual, which is right here under the login button on any page that we have, the portal user manual actually gives you information in the correspondence section on the prior authorization and prior authorization of these services. And there's some screenshots of what it looks like and how to complete it. So if you have any information, you know, you can refer right to our portal user manual. All right. All right. So going back to the slide deck now, we're going to move in and start talking about medical review common findings. But before we talk about these findings, I do want to remind you about taking our survey. So again, your opinion does matter to us. We want to give you the opportunity to tell us what education you want from us in the future. Jennifer's going to again place that link to the survey in the chat. And that's really for any of you that joined after the call started, you may have not seen that prior link, but you can also use that link at any time during the course of our webinar and go out and complete the survey. So moving on, medical review common findings. So in these next couple slides, there are some review findings that are not necessarily prior authorization findings, because not only do we have prior authorization process for these services, but we also have some targeted probe and educate reviews going on. So in prior authorization, the biggest thing that we see that makes a request for prior authorization not affirmed on the first request is not providing that documentation that's necessary to support both the patient complaints and the visual fields. So usually something is missing. That usual something is that physician interpretation of the visual fields or the pictures. Those are the two biggest things. But as we move on, we can see that these things happen to be the same findings upon review in the targeted probe and educate process. So again, outside the prior authorization process, if you are requested to submit documentation for review, I want to talk about some of these issues and what makes a claim not payable upon review. So the These denial codes that are going to be listed on the next couple of slides are the reasons why a claim may not have been paid in full. They're listed in rank order of the most amount of denials to the least amount of denials. The first denial code is the HP 400. The HP 400 is for documentation not received for review. So the documentation that was missing could be like the pre-op exam, the photographs, the visual fields with interpretation, pictures, etc. On each of the slides, I also like to provide the exact wording, which is this top part, and then an AKA section, like otherwise known as section. So the layman's term or the brief explanation. Each of these slides also has how to avoid this issue. This was pretty simple and straightforward. Submit all the documentation requested. Make sure your physician interprets the visual fields and that interpretation is submitted for review. Make sure you submit your photos at the best possible, and make sure that you are reviewing those documentation requirements that we've already discussed and gone through, and that you're providing both patient complaints and symptoms and visual field and interpretation. So remember, you can find all this information in the LCD, which is again linked right here, and the documentation requirements are again linked right there. All right, the next issue, the HP 403. This one's for insufficient documentation to support the patient complaints and finding secondary to eyelid or brow malposition. So in other words, there isn't enough doc, or the documentation didn't support that eyelid droop, dermatitis due to redundant skin, or even difficulties wearing the prosthesis. So you can avoid this issue by making sure that you're documenting that patient complaint, you're documenting any signs and symptoms, and even, again, beyond the signs and symptoms that we had listed on the screen or listed in the LCD, think about all the things that the patient tells you. Again, are they tripping? Are they more accident prone? Do they have issues with stairs? They have difficulty driving, any recent accidents, you know, based on the fact that maybe some peripheral field obstruction. So make sure all of that is getting documented. All right, as we move on, and here's where my mistake was in the PowerPoint or the slide deck that was listed on our website, and why I sent you the new one. I had duplicative information for the 403 and the 405, but the HP 405 is the documentation not supporting the criteria for the visual field impairment. And I apologize to those that, you know, had the old slide deck, and hopefully you got the one that I sent you. So that are happening here. If you're only supplying the visual fields, and the visual fields don't have that physician interpretation, we can't interpret the test. That has to be done and noted by the physician. So if you only send the visual field without interpretation, you may receive a denial, or on prior authorization, you probably will not get an affirmed decision. Also, if you don't send both the elevated and non-elevated, otherwise known as taped and untaped, you may also get a denial. Just sending the non-elevated doesn't support the fact that doing the procedure to lift the blepharoptosis will actually meet the difference to support the medical necessity. And again, that difference being 12 degrees or more, or 30% visual field, you know, documented difference between the taped and untaped lifted and unlifted. All right. And then on your screen are just some resources that weren't linked prior. If you want more information on the blepharoplasty, blepharoptosis, and brow lift. So to recap, today you guys learned about how to obtain a firm decision on prior authorization request. And we achieved this today by reviewing that coverage criteria. We went over the documentation requirements and tips and how to avoid that. We went over how you complete that request form. And then those common medical review findings, if your claim would happen to go to a targeted probe and educate review or a post-submission of your bill review. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. And then I see a question, when insurance plans are advantage plans using your guidelines and deny requests that meet criteria, how do we get around that? Unfortunately, Sandy, we have no control of what the advantage plans do. You have to take those up with the advantage plans themselves. The advantage plans have to offer at least what Medicare offers for coverage, but they don't have to do it in the same manner. They can offer more, they can do it, have coverage in a different format. So unfortunately, when a patient has a Medicare Advantage plan, if you're having issues getting claims submitted or paid, or even if they have a prior authorization process, you will have to go back to that plan to seek out, what additional information they may need. Okay, and seeing no more questions in the chat and in the interest of time, on behalf of Jennifer and myself, as well as all of Medical Review, we want to thank you for participating in today's event. This concludes our webinar, and you may now disconnect.